Religion is scary. Whether you worry about the outsized impact of organised religion on all levels of politics, you're afraid of the potential for religious fanaticism to spill over into wars and violence, or you're just a world builder worried that your world's faiths are going to appear as offensive stereotypes of deeply held convictions. It is easy, and indeed it is common, in world building and fiction in general to shy away from talking about religion, especially most enthusiastic, emotional and serious presentations. To me, this is a real shame. As someone who's studied the social aspects of religion with some real experts, it's hard to overstate just how critical religious thought and authority have been for the history of our world's philosophy, social policy, warfare, and innovations. I believe that religion is not just a fundamental building block in all genres of world building, and also all of society and culture, but that it should actually be the first step in starting to world build in any world. Ponder this for me. What is the oldest country? India? Egypt? Greece? All of these claim major Bronze Age civilizations, some of the earliest settled cities in the world, and clear evidence of large-scale social order. But how much of this is related to the presentation of their modern nations? India only shares its name with the Indus Valley civilization because we don't know what the Indus Valley civilization called themselves, especially because they seem to have been arranged in a variety of semi-independent city-states. The ancient Egyptians called their country Kemet, and the modern Greek practice of calling their country Hellas is not a callback to what the ancient Greeks called themselves, but a reference to the mythic founder of one tribe in Thessaly. Countless conflicts, power grabs, colonizations, and yes, religious revolutions stand in the way of drawing a continuous line of statehood through the years. Not to mention that the notion of a nation-state as we understand it is at its earliest a 17th century invention. To have a nation, you at least need a recognised land claim secured by political or military force in which the rule of law is enforced by systems controlled by some unified authority. If all of these factors cease to exist, then your nation has collapsed, which gives us all of our lovely ancient empires, ruins of civilization, and cities of legend passed through dozens of hands. This all means that in the modern world, the number of countries that are over 1,000 years old can probably be counted on your fingers. This makes sense. Things change in history. But it means that when we world build a nation, we're almost certainly then having to develop multiple civilizations, multiple nations, even in just one geographic area. In contrast, religions kind of just stick around. Where national identity is complex and couched in questions of power, authority, and environment, religious identity can be far more personal, less requisite on authority, and can move with a community in diaspora, which we see throughout history, best exemplified by the history of Jewish displacements throughout the ancient Near East and across medieval Europe and many more places besides. Religion moves with its people, and through factors like syncretism and assimilation, it morphs and shifts to adhere to new social environments, laws, and regimes. Vedic Hinduism, for example, has survived and spread from its origins in Indo-Iranian faiths, and has had an active religious community since at least 1500 BCE. Heck, it's likely that some deities and ritual practices actually come from the people of the Indus Valley civilizations and become synthesized into a more recognizable Hindu form over time. Confucianism has its formal origins in the 5th, 6th century BCE. And despite periods of both massive suppression and widespread governmental adoption across China's dynasties, the philosophy still exists today. Islam, for its part, has two significant branches: both of which trace a direct lineage of authority back to the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century CE. And the Catholic papacy does something very similar. Now, all of these lineages of leadership and authority going back thousands of years are always far more messy and less singular than they are usually presented. At some points in history, for multiple years, there are no popes. And in the early 15th century, there were 3 who all claimed legitimacy and all had some power in local environments. And Islam's Great Schism begins with a debate on the proper succession of leadership. But the fact remains that the faiths around these debates continue to exist in practice throughout all the time that the debates rage. You will commonly find families around the world who can trace Catholic, Jewish, or Islamic faith for over 1,000 years. And that's just using the big international faiths. It's likely that many traditional religions have been practiced and modified and have developed since civilization began. By contrast, there are no current citizens of the Fatimid Caliphate or Byzantine Empire. They don't exist anymore. There's not been some sort of underground movement where a few families have kept the empire alive all this time. That's just not how nations work. Basically, what this means for world builders is that whenever you build a religious system, you know you will be able to use it. It will not sit wasted as part of some hidden history that sits in a lore document specifically related to some ancient temple. Yes, there are real-world ancient sites that we don't understand. Real gods of history who are long forgotten. But the process of lived religion, the cobbling together of familial and official rituals, and the tendency of faiths to merge, split, ebb and flow means that the rituals, belief and faith practices of ancient people are likely inherited in some way by other, bigger faiths. Humans have been ritually washing and purifying themselves in the Indus River for around 10,000 years. But that's not even the best part of starting your world building by looking to religion. Frankly, if you're wanting continuity of existence and a guarantee of permanence unchanging over time so that whatever you make can be used in whatever era you're setting your story, you should really start with physical geography. The youngest volcanoes are as old as Christianity, and the oldest predate most life on Earth. The main reason I think you should start with religion is actually that the operation of most faiths really lends itself perfectly to extrapolation, to speculation, and the influence of culture, species, society, and nature. Broadly, very broadly, there are 2 types of religious system. The first of these is creedal, where adherents define their faith through specific truths or affirmations that are supposed to be valid across all believers who they share communion with. Things like the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed, the Shema or the Shahada, or the Buddhist 3 Jewels or Taratna, or the 4 Noble Truths. The second type of religious system doesn't focus so much on orthodoxy of belief as much as it does a lived and negotiated relationship with the divine. Beliefs and rituals are still mediated by priestly experts, but the core of faith is found in a relational understanding, not a creedal or doctrinal one. This kind of negotiated relational faith is found across the major polytheisms like Hinduism, as well as in certain Christian sects like Quakerism, as most major faiths have non-creedal offshoots. Most commonly, this is the kind of faith that is found in traditional religions, with small communities and no centralized orthodox authority. Often this split in the 2 types of faith that I've presented here, again, very broadly, is often referred to as the distinction between orthodoxy and orthopraxy. Right doctrine versus right practice being the important thing. But that is a false dichotomy. As with anything in religion, these things are messy, blurry, and depend on the individual practicing, and generally there's a bit of both in everything. But what I want to stress here is that both of these broad forms of faith are so massively useful and easy to work with as a world builder that I do not understand why people don't use this as a springboard. Right, because the whole point of a creedal faith is to develop or have a short statement, an elevator pitch, if you will, that accurately and succinctly sums up exactly what that group believes is true. So, as a world builder, a creedal religion is so damn useful because you've always got this grounding to fall back on and extrapolate out from. Let's say that after 3 great interspecies, international councils, your faith's orthodoxy has decided that the truth of their religion is that our world is a branch of the great tree planted by Mother Nature, who prunes reality to protect us and help us grow. Your next job as a world builder is to ask why this needed codifying in the first place, and whether this creed could be challenged. You could have a sect who argue that Mother Nature didn't actually create the seed, they only planted it, arguing that the seed of existence pre-exists the Mother Nature's involvement. Another sect might suggest that our branch is more important than other branches, where mainstream thought gives equal weight to all branches of reality. Hermits or saints may go on long journeys to find the confluence of all branches on the tree, to find the trunk and get closer to their god. Or they might do the opposite and seek places of newness, novelty and light to be closer to the end of the branch, to safeguard those places where new things grow, and aid in Mother Nature's task that way of growing the branches ever upwards. Different interpretations of pruning or growth could lead to practical disputes in interventionist policies, or even culling other people. And there would likely be other elements of a faith arguing for complete self-removal from action to allow Mother Nature to do her thing. Are heretics deniers of other branches of reality existing? Or do they deny that Mother Nature herself cares and nurtures for these people? The answer is probably all of the above, in some way, in some location, at some time in history. You can't just do this with a nation. You can't reduce a nation to a mission statement and frame incongruities as heresies, or fringe beliefs, or, the best one, a personal, local philosophy. Because that's the other part of this, the other half of this. Most religions actually don't have something as helpful to a world builder as a creed. Because the debates among their authorities haven't got to a point where defining their faith and what is and isn't part of their faith within a sort of 3-sentence litmus test is necessary yet. But that's also good for world building. Sure, your religion may have a foundational set of stories, parables, myths, or a holy text. It doesn't have to, but it can. But the fundamental fact of all religious expression is that it is personal, and heavily influenced by environment, social standing, family ties, geography, and nationality. As we've discussed already, a nation has necessary fundamentals to exist: a social order, or a physical space, leadership, and the method to perpetuate authority. These things change, the nation as a whole is changed. And as a world builder, if you don't like the way a nation's turned out, you tend not to get a redo at that, because it all ends up quite relational to other nations in a geopolitical mash. But if you don't like the way initially that a religion is presented, or how it shakes out in your world, or if it doesn't feel quite the same, well, that's just a local flavour of this faith, or it's a syncretism that isn't adopted everywhere. Or it's a new style of faith, or an old style of faith popularised by a city or enforced by some sort of national leader. And normalcy, or a different version of this faith, could be enforced or restored just as quickly as any new orthodoxy. Because religion is a social vehicle designed for survival from suppression or diaspora, rituals can be modified if their components are prohibited. Or rituals can lie publicly dormant, practiced only in family units or some small town, or by some charismatic syncretist who's living on the edge and bringing their old beliefs into this new order that's been imposed on them. The same faith will look different, sometimes wildly different from nation to nation, time to time, even community to community, with perhaps a few core common features. But even those common features are not universal features. Not every Christian denomination is creedal, and not all denominations that would consider themselves Christian use the Bible as their primary holy text. Purifying yourself with water as an important ritual action becomes washing yourself with sand if you're living in the desert. Fasting becomes actually a limited diet if one needs to be on the move, or exists in an army. Huge shrines and temples become tiny little idols when the religious folk that need to worship at them are off at sea, for instance, where sky burials become burials on the sail, or indeed water burials instead. The beauty of religion and faith is that every part of them is negotiated in real time with respect to company, persecution, environment, work, war, and security. That's why religions tend to be really hard to eradicate. Even sects tend to be really hard to eradicate. That's why pagan druidic rituals infiltrate into Roman and Catholic Christianity. All the while, the pagan druids seem to disappear into nothingness, as the record books show, which makes it all a world builder's dream. Religion responds to whatever's happening. Organised religion responds slightly more slowly, forming a layer of extra complexity every time you make a choice about anything else in your world. How do the faiths respond to it? How will they exist in a world that has these restrictions or rules or existential factors? Treating faith and religion and religious organisation as the clearly fundamental social force that it really seems to be is definitely the best way to go to actually make your societies and your faiths feel real, and to save yourself the work, honestly. And it is hard work of having to impose a rigid religious system top down onto a society that is not made around it, or has not, or whose religion has not altered to fit said society. Which, if you look at real world history, it does turn out to be a very hard thing to do. I hope you've enjoyed that and find it interesting and are inspired perhaps to take on this new way of world building, or an old way if you've been doing this for years. I don't know your process. Now you know a little more of mine. It always starts with religion because it's just such this fundamental force that is so easy to chop and change and swap and make fit any sort of social organisation that exists. But that's enough of that. Please let me know what you think about this method in the comments. I would love to hear from you. But again, as always, we'll try and keep it nice and civil. That's just better for everyone. In any case, I hope we've all had a wonderful time. I hope you may have learned something. And with all that said, I've been Tom, otherwise known as the thegrungeonmaster. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.